Hello everyone, I am back with another video. Today I will be addressing some of the countless questions I have got in the last couple of days asking me about my thoughts on the Kendall Jenner, Audrey Hepburn, My Fair Lady, Met Gala comparison. So to clarify, 2 days ago as of filming this was the Met Gala 2021, and to it, Kendall Jenner wore a dress designed by Matthew Williams for Givenchy that she has stated was inspired by the dress Audrey Hepburn wore in the film My Fair Lady in 1964. And for those of you wondering why people asking me about my opinion, I'm a fashion historian specialising in the work of Hubert de Givenchy and particularly his collaboration with Audrey Hepburn. So I have got some points that I'd like to add to the conversation. And I have to say that the majority of the messages that I've received over the past couple of days have been overwhelmingly negative. There's been quite a bit of upset at the parallels being drawn between Kendall and Audrey and the dress Audrey wore and the dress Kendall wore. And people seem to want to know my opinion as a specialist in Audrey Hepburn and her style. But I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm not a gatekeeper of Audrey Hepburn or her style, nor do I believe that it needs gatekeeping. However, there are some interesting facts and stories that I'd like to throw into the mix to add to this conversation. To preface this video, I will say that I'm going to keep all personal opinions about Kendall Jenner, about the Kardashians, out of this conversation because firstly I don't know enough about them, I don't know them, I have no right to comment, and I'm here to talk about the clothes. I'm here to talk about the original dress that Audrey wore and how it inspired Kendall's dress for the Met Gala red carpet. So as I say, I've received a lot of messages from people that are upset by the parallels being drawn between Kendall and Audrey and the looks that they wore, and I'm afraid that I might disappoint some people by saying that I think inspiration of any kind is a genuinely wonderful thing, and the fact that a look that Audrey wore nearly 60 years ago is still inspiring looks in popular culture and fashion, to me is remarkable. That's such a positive thing, and I think it's a bit of a shame that it's been turned into a negative. But before I get into any of that, let's talk about the dress that Audrey wore, the dress that served as the inspiration for this Met Gala red carpet look. Audrey Hepburn wore this dress in the film My Fair Lady, released in 1964. And contrary to some information that's been put out there, because Kendall has worn a dress that was designed by Matthew Williams for Givenchy, in part as a tribute to Audrey's relationship with Hubert de Givenchy, the namesake of the brand, whose work Audrey wore almost exclusively both on and off screen. It's led a lot of people to believe that the dress that served as the inspiration was also designed by Hubert de Givenchy. It was not. It's actually one of the very few screen-worn pieces that Audrey wore that was not designed by Givenchy, and instead it was created by the legendary designer Cecil Beaton, who created both the set and costumes for the film and won an Academy Award for his work. So seeing it as a tribute to Audrey and Givenchy's collaboration is a somewhat thin source of inspiration, considering Givenchy actually had no say in the original dress. He had no input in its creation. But another interesting fact about the dress that Audrey wore in the film is that it was not created from scratch for the film. And what I mean by that is the film itself was set in 1912, and the dress that Audrey is wearing in this scene is actually a reworked antique original dress from 1910. And we know this from an interview that Audrey Hepburn did in 1990, in which she states that the dress she wore was actually an original antique, and also from Cecil Beaton's diary entry, in which he talks about how they had found this original 1910 ball gown and had used the embroidery and beadwork. And so we can infer that an antique gown was found and then reworked to what we see on screen today to be a dress that is not only symbolic of the opulence of Edwardian fashion, but also with the infusion of 1960s sensibilities and aesthetic with the sort of shift dress style that would have appealed to the contemporary audience at the time of the film's release. And the reason I'm talking about this is because for me it only adds to just how remarkable it is that this dress is continuing to inspire people, because not only is it a dress that Audrey wore 60 years ago, it's a dress that was originally made 110 years ago, and that is continuing to influence popular culture and fashion and being used as a reference on the Met Gala red carpet. That to me is quite special. So the next thing that people have asked me to address is the Kendall versus Audrey comparison. Many of the comments that I received were more or less saying that there was no comparison at all. Audrey was a symbol of elegance, and when we look at the dress that Kendall wore, there is no comparison at all to Audrey Hepburn or her style, because Audrey would never wear a dress that revealing or a dress even remotely similar to what we now know and what now deem a naked dress. And I want to talk about this a bit further because Audrey Hepburn is of course known as this beacon of style and elegance and sophistication, and known to have dressed like a lady at all times with her white gloves and her low-heeled shoes and her pearls, and always looking very proper, which is in part very true. That was a signature trademark of Audrey's style and something that she is remembered fondly for. But what is often overlooked, which I wish wasn't, is just how many fashion risks Audrey took. Part of the reason that Audrey is still remembered today in fashion and popular culture is because she made a statement in fashion. She did something different, and that went beyond just the archetypal elegant styles that we remember her for wearing. And actually, what a lot of people don't want to hear is that Audrey's personal style may not have been too far from the look that Kendall wore on the red carpet as we might be led to believe. So in trying to combat some of the messages that I got that have said that Audrey would never wear such revealing dresses or show parts of her body, or God forbid wear a naked dress, I have this to say. It's not true. Audrey actually wore some pretty epic and risque pieces in her time. As an example, I'm going to take you back to 1953. Now this is the year that Audrey really became a star. It was the year that Roman Holiday was released, her first major motion picture, for which she would later win an Oscar, and she was being catapulted into meteoric fame. And already she was being seen as this elegant, demure symbol of European beauty and sophistication. And yet, lo and behold, on the December 1953 cover of Life magazine, she was photographed wearing an oversized man's white shirt and nothing else. And let me tell you, this caused some upset at the time, namely with Audrey's mother, who was shocked and upset by the fact that her daughter would be seen on the cover of a magazine so scantily clad. And looking at this from a modern perspective, it may not seem as risque as it perhaps was then, but if we look at this through the lens of 1953, here is this young starlet on the cover of Life magazine, one of the most popular magazines on the shelves, and she's wearing nothing but a man's shirt. Not only has she got her legs on show, but she is also wearing something really quite suggestive in its nature, because it begged the question of, where did she get the man's shirt from? What man left his shirt behind? Not only that, but we can't forget that Audrey repeated this very same look nearly a decade later in the film Breakfast at Tiffanys, the film that is widely remembered as the symbol of elegance and sophistication when it comes to Audrey's style. And yet, we forget that in that film, Audrey is actually playing a call girl. That's her character. She wears a very, very similar ensemble in one of the early scenes of the film. A scene starts to her in bed, in the middle of the day, not wearing any clothes, and the doorbell rings and she reaches for the first item of clothing she can find, which is, once again, an oversized man's white shirt. Suggestive in the idea that this shirt has been left behind by a man who has probably spent the night. Not only that, but if we look at the iconic opening scene of the film where she's wearing this beautiful black sheath by Givenchy and the pearls and the tiara, she's also wearing these incredible oversized sunglasses by Oliver Goldsmith because she is hiding sleep-deprived eyes, having spent the whole night partying. So what we remember now as such a sophisticated style was actually quite provocative at the time. It was Audrey challenging her image as an elegant dresser by adding these quite suggestive qualities to her wardrobe that I really don't think should be forgotten, because that to me is part of the interest behind her style, how she constantly challenged her image and constantly changed it throughout her career. And there are countless other examples of Audrey wearing different styles, unique styles that perhaps we wouldn't associate with her, be it Givenchy evening gowns with cutouts at her midriff, or the iconic 1967 Paco Rabanne metal disc dress that she wore in the film Two for the Road. But then that leads me on to the comparison of Audrey and Kendall again, because people say she would never wear what we now know to be a naked dress. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappoint you again by saying that Audrey actually wore a relatively early incarnation of what we now know to be a naked dress. In 1979, Audrey Hepburn starred in the film Bloodline, in which she wore a Givenchy evening gown, which was completely sheer on the top. Not only that, but it had a sheer thigh-high slit that went all the way up to the waist. And the most provocative part of this dress was that Audrey's chest was only covered by very strategically placed black velvet flowers. And again, this is another example of Audrey's often forgotten ability to really push the envelope with her style. Not only was she wearing a version of a naked dress in 1979, but she was also 50 years old at the time of this film's release. So she was twice Kendall's age, and it was so risque at the time, and even now, that in promotional images and posters and on the DVD cover as we see it today, the dress is edited so that the bodice looks to be covering her chest completely, because people don't want to see Audrey Hepburn in that slightly more risque style. But the fact is, she wore it and she looks fantastic. So now let's bring it back to Kendall's dress, because through looking at Audrey's style more specifically, there's actually a lot more similarities than one might think at first glance. In terms of the dress that Kendall wore, there are some differences that I would have liked to have seen. I loved the reference that she paid to My Fair Lady. I personally would have liked to see a dress that was slightly more befitting the theme of the Met Gala. I understand that a tribute was being paid to Audrey Hepburn as a Hollywood icon, that being a symbol of America to a certain extent, but Audrey wasn't American, Cecil Beaton, who created the dress, wasn't American, the film in which she wore it was set in London, and there would have been many more films they could have chosen as a reference that would have been more befitting the theme. From a modern perspective, I think this idea of the naked dress is something we've seen quite a lot. I would have loved it if perhaps something a little different was done, but still using that reference and inspiration from Audrey, because that for me is a wonderful thing and something that I'd love to see more of. So in all of this, I think my point really boils down to that despite your feelings about Kendall Jenner or even the dress that she wore, whether you like it or not, what I don't want to happen is that with this comparison between Kendall and Audrey, Audrey is further pushed into this pigeonhole of being quite safe in her style and aesthetic, when actually she was making some really quite daring choices in her time. And that, as a fashion historian specializing in her work and that of Givenchy, I would like that to be remembered far more. There are many more comparisons to be drawn between the two looks than perhaps one might think. I wanted to be able to add that to the conversation as well, instead of just being a case of who wore it better. For me, I'm always going to prefer Audrey's version of the dress, that's a given. There's a lot more to break down between these looks, and I wanted to be able to talk about that. So I hope I've been able to shed a bit more light on the inspiration behind Kendall's Met Gala look, and I'd love to hear your opinions below. What do you think about the dress? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I hope you have a lovely day wherever you may be, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.